Don't get me started on Joe Rogan. Can't stand the guy. Thinks he's the expert on everything from psychedelics to MMA.
Wait, Giggly One. I gotta know, what's got you so worked up about me? I mean, I know I can be a little controversial, but let's talk it out.
Ha! Controversial is an understatement, buddy. Rogan spreads more misinformation than a political convention. And it's not just me, plenty of people have their issues with him. But hey, if you think you can handle some criticism, sure, let's have a chat.
Look, GigglyLinks8661, I get it. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's all right. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, huh? I try to bring on the most interesting guests and get into some real interesting topics. So let's talk. What issues do you have with my show?
Oh, we're getting into the issues now, huh? Well, for one, your guests range from interesting to downright bizarre, not in a good way. Your topics are all over the map, and sometimes it sounds like you're just spouting nonsense for shock value. And let's not forget the controversial guests you've had on, spreading conspiracy theories and misinformation.
First off, my guest choices might not always be your cup of tea, but they're interesting to me and my listeners. And sure, my topics might be all over the place, but isn't that what makes it interesting? I'm not out here to fit into some boring box. As for those controversial episodes, man, I'm just trying to have conversations. That's what my show is about. If you don't like what you hear, tune out.
I get it, you like to keep things interesting, but interesting doesn't always equal responsible or ethical. I agree you have some cool guests on, but then you also bring on some real problematic ones. And while you say you're just having conversations, your platform reaches millions of people. Maybe it's time to start thinking about the influence you have and how it affects your audience. Plus, some might say your topics jump around so much it starts to sound like you're just talking out of your ass.
Look, GigglyLinks8661, I'll give it to you that I've had some guests on who might not be everyone's favorite, but I believe in hearing all sides of a story. And I agree my platform does reach millions, and that does come with influence. But I'm not here to babysit my listeners. They're smart enough to form their own opinions. And as for talking out of my ass, well, that's just your opinion, man.
Well, yeah, I get that. But it's not about babysitting your listeners, it's about taking some responsibility for the content you put out there. You say you believe in hearing all sides, but when you have questionable guests on, you're not always doing a great job of fact checking or challenging their views. And as for my opinion on your talking style, I mean, come on, man. Sometimes it really does sound like you're just winging it.
Man, I respect your opinion and even agree that sometimes it might sound like I'm winging it, but that's just the nature of my show. I bring on guests from all walks of life and let the conversations flow. It's not always about fact checking or challenging views, it's about having open, honest conversations. And regarding the influence I have, I've always encouraged my listeners to think for themselves and do their own research. It's not on me if people blindly follow what they hear on a podcast.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I get that your style is all about letting conversations flow and having open discussions, but I still don't buy into the whole it's not on me thing. You've got a huge following, man. You gotta take some responsibility for what you're putting out there. Even if you encourage people to think for themselves, some folks just won't, and they'll take everything you say as the gospel truth.
I understand what you're saying about the potential influence of my platform, but I still don't think it's fair to put all the responsibility on me. I'm just a host having conversations with people. It's like if someone takes everything they hear on a podcast as the gospel truth, that's on them, you know? Plus, I always try to make it clear that I'm just a dude having conversations with interesting people, not a expert in every topic. But hey, I appreciate your perspective, even if we don't see eye to eye on this.
Yeah, I get it. You're not an expert in everything, and you're just hosting conversations. But you gotta remember, you're not just some guy having a chat with friends, man. You've got millions of listeners and a whole platform to consider. Even if you make it clear you're not an expert, some people will still take everything you say as the truth. So maybe it's time to start thinking about your content a little more deeply, you know? Not just for your reputation, but for the sake of your listeners. Just a thought. Um, you know, it's, and
I hear you and I do think about my content, but I also believe in having spontaneous, real conversations. That's what my show is about. And I don't think it's fair to expect me to walk on eggshells all the time just because I have a large platform. My listeners are grown ass adults, and I trust them to form their own opinions. If they choose to blindly follow what I say, that's on them, not me. I'm here to entertain and maybe spark some interesting conversations, not to be some moral compass for millions of people.
okay, I get it. You're all about authenticity and having genuine conversations. But let's not pretend like your platform doesn't come with some responsibility. And yeah, your listeners are grown-ass adults, but not everyone's going to think critically and form their own opinions. Some people just take everything they hear on a podcast as the gospel truth. So maybe you should consider that before you bring on someone with harmful views or spew your own half-baked ideas just for shock value.
I do think about the impact of my platform, but I also believe in free speech and having uncomfortable conversations. It's not always about avoiding harmful views. It's about having open discussions that challenge opinions. Plus, I don't just bring on people with harmful views for the shock value. I bring them on because I think they have interesting perspectives, even if I don't agree with them. And as for people blindly following what they hear on a podcast, I can't control that, man. Everyone's responsible for their own thoughts and actions.
Ah, the free speech card. Look, I get it. Freedom of speech is important. But it's not just about saying whatever the hell you want. It's about being responsible with your platform. And yeah, having uncomfortable conversations is all well and good, but you gotta think about the context and the impact those conversations can have. As for bringing on people with harmful views just because you think they have interesting perspectives, man, that's a slippery slope. You're giving them a platform to spread their harmful ideas to a massive audience. And yeah, people are responsible for their own thoughts and actions, but you've got to.
Look, man, I respect your viewpoint, but I don't agree with everything you're saying. First off, I never said I agree with the harmful views of the people I bring on. No. In fact, I often challenge them on those points in a respectful way. And secondly, free speech isn't a card to play. It's a principle I believe in, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes uncomfortable conversations can lead to understanding and growth. Plus, my listeners aren't just a mindless mob, and I trust their intelligence to see through harmful ideas and form their own opinions.
Sure, I get it, you like having uncomfortable conversations. But let's not pretend that having people with harmful views on your show doesn't give them a platform to spread their ideas. And sure, you may challenge them, but does that really cancel out the potential harm their views might cause? And as for your listeners, yeah, they might not be a mindless mob, but some of them might still take those harmful ideas and run with them. It just seems like there's more to consider than just free speech and having interesting conversations.
I hear what you're saying, man, and I do consider the potential harm my guest views can cause. That's why I try to challenge them and provide additional context for my listeners to consider. But I don't believe in censoring people just because they have unpopular or controversial views. And I trust my audience to think for themselves and not blindly follow harmful ideas. I believe in open dialogue and discourse, even if it means having uncomfortable conversations.
Sure, dialogue and discourse are important, and I get that you're all about open conversations. But there's a fine line between having an uncomfortable conversation and giving a platform to harmful ideas. And trust me, not all your listeners are going to think for themselves and see through harmful ideas. Some of them might take those ideas and run with them, even if you do your best to challenge them. It's just something to keep in mind, you know?
I agree that not all my listeners will think critically about every idea they hear on my show, but that doesn't mean I should censor everyone. I believe in giving people the chance to express themselves and be challenged. And yeah, some listeners might take harmful ideas too far, but that's their responsibility, not mine. I provide context, challenge ideas, and encourage my listeners to think for themselves, but I can't control every thought that enters their head.
Sure, you provide context and challenge ideas, but let's not forget that you're a major influencer with a massive platform. It's great that you want to give people the chance to express themselves, but it's just not that simple, man. By inviting someone with harmful views on your show, you're giving them a platform to spread their ideas to a huge audience, regardless of how much you challenge them. And yeah, your listeners are responsible for their own thoughts, but you can't ignore the fact that you have a huge influence on them.
I get it. I have a big platform and a lot of influence. And I take that seriously, man. I'm not just blindly giving people a platform without thinking about the consequences. I challenge their ideas, provide context, and encourage critical thinking. And yeah, some people might take those ideas too far, but that's on them, not spreading harmful views. They're here to have a full conversation.
Yeah, I get that you're not being careless about your guests and their views, but let's be real. Even if you challenge their ideas and provide context, there's still a risk that people might not think critically about the conversation. And while it's great that some of your guests have thoughtful conversations, sometimes even those conversations can lead to harmful ideas being spread. Maybe consider that even though you trust your listeners, they're not.
I hear what you're saying, and I know that my platform carries responsibility. But it's also important to note that not all my conversations lead to harm. In fact, many of them spark important discussions and provoke critical thinking. And while I'm aware that some listeners might not think critically, I trust that most of them do, and I believe in giving them the chance to hear a variety of perspectives. Again, it's about finding that balance between responsibility and open dialogue.
Okay, fair enough. Not all your conversations lead to harm, and some might actually provoke important discussions. But sometimes harmful ideas have a way of sneaking into even the best intentioned conversations. Plus, yeah, you trust your listeners to think critically, but let's not kid ourselves. Not all of them will. Some might just take everything they hear as gospel, and that's where things can get tricky. It's just something to keep in mind, you know?
I agree that harmful ideas can find their way into conversations even unintentionally. That's why I do my best to challenge those ideas and provide additional context. And yeah, not all listeners will think critically about everything they hear, but that doesn't mean I should avoid controversial topics altogether. I believe in having open conversations, even if it means dealing with difficult ideas. Plus, it's not like I blindly agree with every viewpoint I hear on my show. I'm not afraid to challenge and even ridicule ideas that seem too extreme.
Look, I get it. You're not afraid to challenge and even ridicule ideas that seem extreme. But let's face it, the nature of your
Absolutely.
platform
Open
is that you're going to
dialogue
have
is
a lot of
important to me,
people listening
but
to
that
these
doesn't mean I'll
conversations.
blindly agree
And
with
as
everything
much
someone
as you try to
says.
challenge
I'm not
harmful
afraid to
ideas,
speak my mind
there's
and
still a chance
challenge
that some
ideas that I
people will
think are
take them
harmful
seriously
or
and
just
run
plain
with them,
ridiculous.
even
It's
if you
all part
ridicule them.
of having an
So
honest
while it's great
conversation,
that
you
you
know?
value open conversations, just be mindful of the potential impact on your listeners, know?
I definitely keep my listeners in mind, man. That's why I try to provide a balanced perspective and challenge harmful ideas. And yeah, some people might take things too far, but it's not like I'm promoting those ideas. My show is about having interesting conversations and getting people to think. And hey, sometimes that means dealing with uncomfortable topics. After all, you can't always have a conversation about kittens and rainbows, right?
Yeah, you're right about that. Not all conversations can be about kittens and rainbows, and sometimes dealing with uncomfortable topics is necessary. And sure, you're not actively promoting harmful ideas, but by providing a platform for those ideas to be discussed, you are giving them a certain amount of validity, whether you like it or not. It's just something to keep in mind, man.
I see
Man,
where
is
you're
that all
coming
you've
from,
got?
but I don't
A weak
believe that
attempt at
simply
dismissing my
discussing an
point?
idea gives it
Sorry, but
validity.
I won't
In
get out
fact, I
just
think it's
because you
important to
can't
have
handle a
open
simple
conversations about
conversation.
controversial topics so we can challenge and refute those ideas. I don't shy away from discussing things that some might find offensive or harmful because I